Hey guys, thanks for joining us on a Saturday afternoon here for this edition of Tropical Tracks. Of course, we're talking about Ian. I know, we're on an I storm, right? Ian has a long history. The I names have a long history of being problematic storms, and a lot of them have been retired. But we're gonna roll with it and get through it and do our best. So let's talk about what's going on first. I don't want to show the 11 AM advisory. I want to kind of wait for the new advisory because I think we're going to see some more changes here. Models have been once again shifting all over the place. We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the models and talk about everything that's going on there. But let's get started here and first off talk about what has been going on today. And the hurricane hunters have been out there, Air Force and NOAA, and they have been finding kind of an elongated center. And when I say elongated center, let me show you what that looks like. And this is kind of a plot here of where the center has been. And if you look carefully, these little wind barbs, wind flags, show the wind is in the first pass when the storm came through, going that direction, and then going that direction down there, and then going that direction down there, and then going that direction there. So we basically had this elongated center there that kind of looked like that. Now, lots of folks were commenting there saying, yeah, but there's a big blow up of thunderstorms over here to the northwest. And so hurricane hunters went on over there and investigated that area. They did find some stronger winds, just barely tropical storm force strength there at flight level as they went through that area of big thunderstorms. But they also found that the pressure was a little bit lower over there and maybe the beginnings of a new center. Now, this is expected whenever you have a tropical system that's coming together. Sometimes you get multiple centers, elongated centers. We've had areas of thunderstorms kind of blowing up all over the place. I'll show you that here. We had these thunderstorms that earlier were down here. They have kind of weakened, and because those thunderstorms have weakened and these thunderstorms up here have really blown up, then it's basically all that air going up has lowered the pressure near the surface, near the water there, and then the winds are starting to go in to try to fill in where that air pressure has dropped. So that's kind of a process here, a formative process that we're in with Ian, and that's probably going to be something that we see for the next 12, maybe even 24 hours, kind of it getting its act together. Now, the good thing about this formative process is that it usually slows down any rapid intensification because sometimes you get these competing centers of low pressure and they're kind of fighting with each other. But once one center takes over, then because all the other conditions favor strengthening, it should begin to strengthen and could strengthen quite rapidly. That's the good news. The good news part is that the slowing of possibly the intensification trend. The bad news is that, remember we were talking about the models do better when we have a trackable center. Well, we kind of don't really have a real well-defined, persistent, coherent center that is sticking around. And so that gives us a little bit of question on the uncertainty factor here. But as you can see, there's that one little stamp there. That's the estimated center of low pressure there, and it does look like that is beginning to take over. It would have been a little bit of kind of an interesting fact if our center had formed down here, because that south center, as we'll see in the models, looked like it was going to be taking the outside lane. If you picture a track, you know, the runners that run on the inside of the track, they don't have as far distance to go, so they kind of make a quicker time around the track. But if you run the outside of the track, you have longer to go. So if the center had formed down there to the south, it may have had longer to go to get around into the Gulf. That may have played a factor down the road. Hard to say. It may not even matter now. So let's take a look at kind of some of the steering factors here, assuming that the center is kind of on a more northward track here. This is today's GFS solution. Now, this is what we call the deterministic or the operational model here. This is one computer run based on this model here, and this is the upper air pattern. The ensembles, that's one computer run many times. Sometimes we look at the ensembles and see how their members are all spread out, or we look at the single run models, the deterministic or dynamical models, and we see how they compare with each other. But let's talk about this first off. This is the 72-hour forecast. So this is Tuesday morning time frame here, and that is where, according to the GFS, Ian is expected to be. And we've been talking about this dip in the jet stream, this trough here coming along and helping to steer it. And how far south would that influence get? Would it get far enough to kind of turn Ian to the north and east? That's usually an effect that occurs when you have a big trough like that. And the GFS was early on saying, yes, it looks like it's going to turn it to the northeast. But then the GFS now has kind of backed off on that, and it's saying, and I'll advance forward here and show you, the GFS is now saying, I don't think it's going to take as much of a turn to the northeast. This is the 5-day position here. This is Thursday morning, and you can see the center there up in the north central Gulf of Mexico, kind of almost in the northeast Gulf of Mexico. So that, once again, is the GFS track shifting back to the west. Look at the trough. Look at the dip in the jet stream there. You can't really find it. It is moving on out and moving on out quickly. There is no leftover piece to steer Ian more to the east there. So that is now something that's kind of a little bit eye-opening here, saying that now there is increasing pressure for the Panhandle. I know you folks in the Panhandle that have been watching and commenting are obviously, because of the last few seasons, watch this with great interest. And unfortunately, it looks like a trend is back that way. Okay, that is an advisory for tropical depression Hermine that's coming in. Once again, we're waiting on the advisory for tropical storm Ian. All right, so that is the GFS model. Let's look at the European model. This was the 72-hour forecast. So this is Tuesday morning for the European model. And once again, you can see that trough there, and the trough kind of coming down and a little bit deeper there. And there's a little piece of this trough that kind of wants to hold back. So that would have, if it verified based on this model run, more of a tendency to move Ian to the northeast. In fact, even though the trough is moving out, what this model is saying is that the trough was close enough to turn Ian enough to the northeast. Now the GFS has kind of trended back to the west also, but I mean the European remains the eastmost model there. So we're looking at two big models here that usually do fairly well with storms, and they're still at odds. And I know the GFS has been kind of all over the place. Okay, that is the depression Hermine advisory that's come in there. So here's the ensemble model. This is one model that's run many different times here, and you can see kind of that turn to the northwest there. We're going to be watching this turn with great interest, because if the turn is a little bit sooner, then it might be more to the right of the tracks here. If it's a little bit later, then it would probably favor the left side of the tracks there. But once again, this model has shifted now a little bit onto the west. Oh boy, now we're going to have, what is this? This is post-tropical cyclone Fiona data coming in there. So back to, lots going on here, right? It's a busy time. So back to the GFS model here. This is the one that is shifted back to the left, to the west, and you can see it there. Oh, I don't want that. What are you doing there, computer? You can see it there kind of tracking on more to the west there. And all these red members here, that's a stronger storm or hurricane. And there, once again, is the discussion coming in now on post-tropical storm Fiona. If these tracks over here verify, then it looks closer to the eastern Gulf of Mexico. If it takes longer in its turn, it's possible it'll be closer to the center of the Gulf of Mexico. And now these new solutions are kind of showing the influence of the high pressure system to the east starting to build in, which would keep it moving there. There was a time when it looked like maybe it was caught between the two highs. It's still possible, but that is something also that we will be watching there going forward. All right, lots going on here, right? So here is the trend of the GFS ensemble, and you can see there, at least for the last couple of days, last couple of runs, has been off to the west and southwest. So this is indicating two things here. It's a track, the tracks are more trending towards the west, and because this point here is not as far along as a few days ago as that point there, it's also a slower track there. So the timing is slowing down a little bit, and it's shifting to the west a little bit, at least based on the latest run of the GFS models there. So that's also something we're going to take into consideration as we go forward here. In terms of the many members of the models, you can see they are all very far to the west now. This is the UK model, the other models, the Canadian model, as well as the specific hurricane models. They have all now trended to the west, and this was based on 18Z, so we don't have the new Hurricane Center advisory in here yet. But this line right there, that is the Hurricane Center's old forecast right there. So you can see it is now on the right side of all of the group of models there. So because the Hurricane Center likes to use, because it has great success, this TVCN, TVCA, the consensus models there. The consensus models are right in the middle there, and so the Hurricane Center is likely going to shift their 5 o'clock advisory of Ian back to the west, or to the west there as we go forward. So what does that mean for Florida? I mean, that has huge implications, especially for the southeast coast of Florida, right? Especially if that's the case. I'm not going to say too much until we see that advisory. Special weather statement from Miami for some thunderstorms. But let's talk about the intensity here. And the intensity, of course, is also very, very high. Some of these models here, some of these members here are in the Cat 3. Some are into the Cat 4 range. And you can see as of the 11 AM advisory, that's the Hurricane Center's forecast there. They were on what we would say is the lower side of the envelope. So lots of uncertainty here, of course, lots of things to watch, and lots of considerations here as we go forward. And we're not all out of the woods yet, of course, in Florida, but we see a trend. If people were asking me in South Florida, how are you feeling? I would say I'm not feeling worse. Sometimes the trend shifts and you start feeling worse about it. I don't know that I'm feeling better yet because we still have that development stage that we're going on. There was a request for this earlier, so I wanted to kind of show this. This is the rainfall forecast if the European model verifies, and you can see there is a huge swath near the Europeans forecast center there of anywhere from about 10 to 15 inches of rain. Much of the peninsula on the right side of the storm here is in the 3 to 5 inch range. So it's going to be really confined more closely to where the center tracks, and of course that's where you would have the biggest hazards, which would include the surge, as well as the wind threat, as well as the rainfall threat there. And then of course there's always that chance for isolated tornadoes as well, and I'm sure there's a threat that I'm forgetting in here somewhere. So let's talk about, before the advisory comes in, while we're waiting on it, let's talk about where we are in the timeline. Now, because the storm is coming from south to north, that kind of spreads out our timeline from south to north across the state. So in the Panhandle, we're in the 4 to 5 day timeline, time frame here, if it's going to be a track shift to the west, as well as the Big Bend. So that's the 4-day time frame here. So we're at our topping off our hurricane kits and our supplies, kind of in that mindset of thinking that we're going to be dealing with a hurricane event. That's an increasing possibility, and so we're topping things off. For the western part of Florida here, the central part of the peninsula, basically Orlando, the I-4 corridor, over to the Tampa Bay area, including Sarasota, up to we'll say Cedar Key or Crystal River. That's kind of more in this 3-day timeline here. And the 3-day timeline is personal preparations, where you're taking care of getting cash, making sure you've got enough medicine to last, because you want to get through after the storm comes and the disruptions that come on there. Now, we're not quite to the 2-day time frame here, because that's when the watches are issued, and that could happen tomorrow, and that would be more for the Keys, maybe Southwest Florida, areas like that. The Southeast coast here, I think we're certainly not feeling worse about the situation. We may be feeling better. We'll wait for that 5 o'clock advisory. Of course, we don't want to be caught in a situation where the cone has shifted, and then for some reason the storm's initial motion changes, makes a little bit more of a turn in a different direction, and that changes the cone back to us. I think because this trough situation is becoming a little more clear now, and how much of an effect it will have on the steering, then that's kind of taking a little bit of pressure off of Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beaches, as well as the southeast coast, St. Lucie and Martin counties. Kind of what does that mean in terms of what's kind of the worst case scenario here for the southeast coast is if it speeds up and gets up into that trough. That's something we're going to be watching for. So things we're going to be watching for is going faster and things like that. For the Panhandle, of course, you hate to say what's good news for somebody is bad news for somebody else. Unfortunately, when a storm gets into the Gulf, there is really no way out except to land. And I think there's always that other option, which maybe not be a bad option, is that it stalls in the middle of the Gulf. It creates what's called upwelling, where it brings up cooler water from the surface and the rain cools the water, and then it kind of winds itself down. That, unfortunately, is not not a likely solution there. All right, let's talk about a few other things here. There are some other planning considerations that we're obviously making here, and while we're waiting on that advisory, which there's Gaston. This is what we have when we have a really busy part of the season, right? So let's say that our timeline is in fact set to 3 days here, and let me cancel one of my things here. I've got like 5 computers in front of me, so there's a lot going on with all this, and I'm my own director here, so that makes things kind of interesting as well. So in terms of the timeline here, and I will start my show. Let's start show, come on. There we go. So in terms of the timeline here, in terms of our preparations, our clock, now we're getting into this 3-day timeline. And so the 3-day timeline will say what are our preps that we need to be doing right now, especially along the Gulf Coast and also up into the Panhandle. I don't think it's a bad idea to be doing some of these preps as well. Visit the pharmacy, top off your meds, get cash on hand. That's of course important, because if what happens with the systems in terms of the credit card machines and stuff like that, if they lose their ability to make phone calls or use the internet to verify a credit card, then that's a problem, and you can't use your credit card, right? So that's why you have cash on hand and your gas tank at least half full. You want to stay up to date because we don't want any surprises, we don't want any changes here as well. We want to talk to our family about what's going on. We want everybody on the same page, especially for kids. It can be frightening, it can be exciting, it can be a bunch of things, because there's a lot going on, and adults sometimes project that stress onto kids. That happens as well. All right, so what is our hurricane plan? Remember, our hurricane plan first is based on, do you live in an evacuation zone? Because if you live in an evacuation zone, then you will have to move out of the evacuation zone. Does that mean leaving the state? By all means, no. It just means getting far enough to be out of the water threat. Because when we have these strong systems, especially because of the way that the Gulf Coast, the shape of the water line there, it's what we call the bathymetry, which is how deep it gets as you go. It's very shallow, so the water tends to pile up on Florida's west coast when we have stronger hurricanes. So that's certainly going to be a consideration. And then, as we know, it tends to get funneled up in the Big Bend and the Panhandle areas as well. So that is another consideration. If we live in an evacuation zone, we just need to get out of the evacuation zone. Also, another consideration here is, do we have special needs? Do we have things like family or friends that have oxygen machines, or things that need power, refrigeration? Those are all considerations. Do you need to be in a place where you can have more reliable power? That's something that you have to consider with all of this as well. Somebody just says the 5 p.m. is up. Let me do a quick check here and see, in fact, if the 5 p.m. is up. It's not that I'm not saying that I'm not trusting you, but I am going to check. So I don't have it on my system yet, but as soon as it comes in, we will jump to it right away, of course. All right, so besides that, 5 days worth of water, food, and medicine. The rule of thumb is 1 gallon per person per day. That's basically 5 gallons per person. Do you need a bunch of things like water bottles and stuff? You can freeze them. That's what I do. And then if the power goes out, I pull them from the freezer and I drop them into the cooler. By the way, because we're about 3 days out, this is when I usually set my freezer side to a very, very cold temperature. The coldest temperature will go. I don't do it to the refrigerator side because I don't want to freeze my food. But on the freezer side, because I want it to have some capacity there that shows that if I have to open it or if the power goes out, it hangs on there. So thanks. The 5 p.m. is up. That was for Fiona, right? I saw those advisories go by, a lot of them. So what's in our hurricane kit? We have working flashlights, of course. And when the storm is getting really close, we want to pre-position those flashlights in case power goes out at night and the lights are out and we can't find them. We want batteries and a way to charge our phone, because we've gotten better in Florida after the 2004-2005 seasons and after Irma at kind of building some resiliency for the cell towers and things like that. Gas stations have generators, as well as many of the grocery stores. So we've gotten much better at this. But a big hurricane, especially if it makes landfall near your location, just kind of wipes out everything. Battery-powered AM and FM radio, because you don't want to, after the storm, continuously stream on your phone and wear down the battery, right? and you might also lose your Wi-Fi and internet connectivity. So you want to be able to get information, especially after all that's going on in terms of the storm leaving. First aid kit, and the big thing with this is that we don't want to get injured after the storm. In fact, I think a lot of people don't realize, especially if you're new to Florida, while you're preparing for the hurricane, you're really preparing for after the storm. Your home preps, shutters, bringing in furniture, things like that. That's done for the storm, during the storm, but all the things like the water, the food, cooling, keep getting your freezer cold, things like that. That is for after the storm. And usually the biggest impact from a storm is from power outages. So you kind of, almost everybody plans for the power outages and some trees down and things like that. And then there are some of us that may have to deal with something much worse if the case is of a landfall nearby and it's a very, very strong system. So this is all a lot of things that we have to think about. Of course, non-perishable food, because eventually your refrigeration situation may wear down to the point where if you don't have a generator, you don't have refrigeration anymore. The one big thing, and boy, this is the lesson from Ida last year and Laura the year before, is that a lot of people, because generators are becoming more affordable and more prolific, you've got to think generator goes with a carbon monoxide detector. Don't buy one without the other, and buy a battery-powered carbon monoxide detector, because you do not want carbon monoxide getting in your house while the generator is running. It's a colorless, odorless gas, and it chokes you by starving your body of oxygen. So a lot of fatalities in our big storms last year after the storm. Okay, the Ian forecast is coming in now. So we will post that up right now. Here we go. All right, so here it is, and in just a second we'll get the crawl along the bottom of the screen when the public advisory comes out. So Jamaica has discontinued the tropical storm watch for Jamaica, and a hurricane warning is now in effect for Grand Cayman. Tropical storm watch is in effect for Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, and we know what the hurricane warning means, right? It means hurricane conditions expected within the next 36 hours. So this is it. This is the 5 o'clock advisory here. Winds are at 45 miles an hour, moving to the west at 16. It's a little bit of a faster motion than we saw earlier, not a lot faster. It probably doesn't make a big difference in the scheme of things. And the Hurricane Center is saying the pressure there is 1,003 millibars. So you're seeing it with me here for the first time as well. So let's see what happens here going forward. So there we are. There is our Saturday night, Sunday morning time frame right there. There's our Sunday afternoon time frame. There is our Sunday night, Monday time frame. So that's 2 a.m. Monday morning, so after midnight Sunday night. So we'll just call that Sunday night there. And there is the public advisory part of that there as well. There is Grand Cayman, and you can see the tropical storm conditions get very, very close to Grand Cayman, and any shift here to the left or any strengthening more than anticipated would put the hurricane conditions into Grand Cayman there. Now, this yellow area here, this is something that I add on. It's based on the National Hurricane Center advisory. I'm not making stuff up here, but my concern has always been that the cone, which you can see right there, that doesn't even come close to the Caymans, it only tracks where that center point is expected to be. But we're not talking about a center point. We're talking about a large storm, and so we need something that shows us, well, where is the large storm going to be? And so that's why I kind of developed this way to kind of show where the whole storm is going, and then we can talk about all the associated hazards as well. But this basically is the tropical storm conditions there in that reddish area there. That's the hurricane conditions. Here we go forward into time here. So now we are in the Monday afternoon time frame, and then there is into the Monday evening time frame, and forecast to be Category 3 now, approaching the far western provinces of Cuba there, Pinar del Rio, and you can see the hurricane conditions extend well into western Cuba. Tropical storm conditions extending pretty far to the east near Havana, and the tropical storm conditions also, and this is the Tuesday afternoon time frame, approaching the lower Keys there. Category 4 is the forecast by Tuesday, afternoon. Remember, we looked at the model data there, that intensity forecast, and many of the models were showing category 4, so that's now included in the Hurricane Center's forecast. Here we go on up to the 4 and 5 day positions. This is the 2 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. This obviously is a track shift to the west because the earlier line was bringing a landfall position based on the forecast points near Tampa. Before that, it was farther to the southwest, so this now is a shift to the west. It's better news for the West Coast. It's not great news because there still could be some deviations. Remember, we're still talking about the possibility of a turn built in there somewhere. This is better news for South Florida metro areas, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. So windy, yes. Squalls, yes. Could see some very, very strong squalls based on this advisory here. Of course, it could shift again, but based on this advisory, this is better news. We're starting to feel a little bit better. Now, I'm not going to feel totally better, and I'm not going to let my guard down in Southeast Florida until we've got a well-defined center, and the models are tracking that very, very well. We've still got some uncertainty here, so that's something we're going to be watching. What this would mean, though, for Miami-Dade, Broward, maybe the Upper Keys, I don't want to get crazy here, as well as the Palm Beaches, is I would say we can pause our preps. Pause the preps. So if you've been doing things and going along here and carrying things inside that could blow around easily, lawn furniture, things like that, columpio, take care of those things still because there could be some gusty winds. For the boat preps, especially in Southeast Florida, it's going to be a southerly wind. So if your boat has an opening to the south, there could be big waves coming in there generated on those long fetches of water. So I would do extra securing of the boat. The West Coast still continue preps. This is something that's so close, I wouldn't pause my preps at all. I would continue to prepare with the possibility that you could experience hurricane conditions as well. So then there's the warning, there's the watch. Let me go back just for a second here because I really think this is important that we talk about, and maybe I can't go back. You know what, I'll do it this way. I'll show you the arrival times here because that's also a thing that we do with planning here. So this is just the tropical storm conditions area because we base our timing on what we call the onset or the arrival of tropical storm conditions. So most government agencies, places like that, they will say we're going to be out there getting ready, taking care of things until the tropical storm conditions arrive, and then we shut down and we wait until the storm has passed. So a lot of the timing from emergency managers, as well as what we should do, is based on the arrival time of the tropical storm conditions, and that's kind of our timing there. So here we are. This is a little before sunrise on Monday morning, and you can see the tropical storm conditions stretching there into the Caymans. And then here we are Monday afternoon, the tropical storm conditions arriving in the west and southwest provinces of Cuba there. Here we are into Tuesday morning. Now look at this on the left here because the storm wind field has gotten a bit bigger. Tropical storm conditions into Cancun, possibly Cozumel there, so the extreme northeast part of the Yucatan Channel, as well as tropical storm conditions extending, it looks like, as far east, maybe based on this advisory, into Havana. And then it's getting close here. This is sunrise or after sunrise, 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, so this is Tuesday morning. Closest approach here is going to be after this time frame. There we are into Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So that's when we have the arrival of the tropical storm winds there along the west coast of Florida. So if we're going to time it here, we're going to say in the Keys, especially the lower Keys, have your things wrapped up by sunset on Monday, and then by sunset on Tuesday for the Florida west coast. Basically, maybe Naples, but probably more likely Fort Myers up through Sarasota, Tampa, and then as we go forward here, even further than that, up to the East Coast. So this is Wednesday night here. So by Wednesday at sunset, we're going to want to have our preps made from, say, Crystal River through Cedar Key on up through Perry, as well as St. Joe and Panama City, as well as, not Pensacola, but Panama City, as well as, unfortunately, Mexico Beach, which dealt a severe blow from Michael. So that is so we're midnight here Wednesday night. So wrap things up by Wednesday sunset for the Panhandle, and then there we go into Thursday afternoon on the timeline there. So let's talk about some of the specifics here, and let's kind of break it down. You know what? I'm gonna as I answer some questions here, kind of we'll zoom back here so you can see if we have some specific timing here. So one of the questions: how much rain do I think for the Caymans? I think some rain now. Still, the storm is relatively small. So I think at this point we're in the 3 to 6 inch rain, which is a lot of rain, even if you're an island there. So that's some of the things that that we look at. Yes, I know the word columpio. That's right. And for those who don't know the word columpio, it is the swinging chair, kind of with the covering that acts like a sail during the wind. We are praying for Tampa, absolutely. We like this shift here. We're not buying into it on the West Coast already, but we are liking it, and let's hope we continue to like it there. The temps in the Florida Straits are in the upper 90s to the upper 80s to the low 90s. That's true. There's very, very warm water and what we call high ocean heat content. And high ocean heat content is how deep does that warm water go. Typically, we think of about 78, 80, 82 degrees as the surface temperature of water that we need for hurricanes to strengthen, tropical storms to strengthen. We're in the upper 80s to the low 90s, and it's very deep too. Now this storm is going to be moving fast enough that the ocean heat content may not be as big of a player. Why is that? Because slow moving storms tend to create what's called upwelling because of the wave. So it pulls deeper water up, and that deeper water cools off the ocean surface, which sometimes on a slow moving storm will weaken it. But the water is so warm and so deep that even if there is upwelling, that's not going to weaken it. So a few of the questions there. Anything else? Storm surge. So we're going to start probably here beginning tomorrow, and I don't know that it was in the public advisory. Excuse me for a second, and I'll look over here. It may have been in the public advisory, and I just didn't get a chance to read it yet. And of course, you can find all this on the Hurricane Center website. So hazards, they're saying storm surge, 2 to 4 feet in the Cayman Islands Sunday night and Monday, and I think here's our rainfall number here. Rainfall. So Jamaica, southern Haiti 2 to 4 up to 6 inches. The Caymans and Jamaica 3 to 6, like I said, a maximum of 10. And now Cuba's showing up in here as well, 4 to 8 inches of rainfall, maximum is 12. And Keys in southern Florida 2 to 4 inches, maximum up to 6 inches through Tuesday evening. So storm surge, this is not a good situation for storm surge with a very strong storm. And Michael was kind of a small, tight core. It's possible that this could be a medium-sized hurricane here, so that's certainly something that we're going to be thinking about. Those numbers could be pretty high, and as the storm gets closer, we'll start to see those numbers as well. So let's see, what else? Thank you. Yes, thank you, of course. You're welcome, of course. So that's kind of the latest here that's going on. I will try to answer any questions you have in the comments or on Twitter as well. I kind of do a little more meteorological deep dive there, but that's basically the latest. The next update tomorrow will be at 10:30 in the morning, and then probably not a 4:30 update tomorrow because I am going to the Dolphins game. And so on that note, I will just say fins up, everybody stay safe, and everybody stay prepared.